And welcome to today's edition of Dr. Carole's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. Today we're going to be talking about what is on everybody's mind at this moment. And it probably still will be when you listen to it, if you're not listening to it live now. What's the most important thing going on in the world? That would be Israel versus Iran. And the fate of the world hangs in the balance. For years, Iran has shouted death to Israel, death to America. And they weren't kidding, even though people really didn't take them seriously. In America, people have their heads in the hole in the ground, in denial that terrorism uh, is is coming for them. So not only has this been their rallying cry, death to Israel and death to America, but they see it as a religious duty to honor Allah by killing what they call unbelievers, meaning anybody who doesn't believe in Islam. Israel was left with no other choice than to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities because this has been going on, for years, where where even though back in the day there was this supposed treaty with Iran that Obama made. Of course, Obama was the BFF of Iranian leaders and other leaders in the Middle East. So he and when he was controlling Biden, they have given Iran billions and billions of dollars. In fact, before October 7th, they had given Iran a huge amount of money, and that allowed Iran to pay for Hamas and other proxies to invade Israel. So now, time has been going by, and Trump has been trying to make an agreement, a treaty with Iran, as far as not using nuclear weapons. And in fact, in this treaty that there was with Obama, there was supposed to be, they were supposed to have their nuclear weapons checked by different inspectors and so on. They weren't supposed to increase their weapons in certain ways to a certain point, and yet clearly we know that they have. And so this has been going on and going on, and Israel in the meantime was in grave danger because there was nothing to stop them. Of course, the truth is, and I can't wait to hear what my guest has to say about this, but the truth is that, and I say this as the terrorist therapist, we can never believe what Iran would say and would agree to in their agreement, because according to the Prophet Mohammed, he said war is deceit. And so really no treaty can be trusted. And in fact, the only one that there has been in recent times wasn't trusted. They continued to enrich their nuclear weapons and advance their nuclear weapons. So this standoff of today has been a long time coming, and the time has come to act, and Israel, and fortunately, of course, President Trump won the election, and he is a friend of Israel's and believe in their right to exist, and so he has been helping. He's kind of keeping it. We don't know exactly what he's going to continue to do, but certainly his heart is with Israel. So let me tell you about my guest today. She knows she knows everything about all of this. My guest is Andrea Widberg. She's the managing editor of American Thinker. She's been with American Thinker since 2020. She's a former Democrat. She was raised in San Francisco. She received a BA from the UC Berkeley and a JD, a lawyer's degree, from the University of Texas at Austin. She worked as a lawyer in the San Francisco Bay Area for 30 years. She had to appear in leftist-run courts, and I'm not sure at that time whether she was still believing in that or not, but we'll get into that. And so she witnessed the Democratic Party. We've all witnessed this change in the Democratic Party, which used to have a lot of Jews in that party. But the Democratic Party has turned against Israel. There's also, of course, been 9/11, and these things, these events have made her re-examine her political beliefs, and she now embraces constitutional conservatism. And her website is www.americanthinker.com. So, Andrea, I know you've been an American thinker, or you are still an American thinker on lots of topics. You've been thinking about a lot. So, today, um, let's hear what you have been thinking about the current battle between Israel and Iran.
I'm thinking that it had to be done. This is an entirely necessary war because Iran poses or posed an existential threat to Israel and made no secret about it. It made no secret about the fact that it was seeking. Well, it lied, Taqiyya, the Muslim doctrine of lying in times of war, but it was apparent to everybody that it was seeking nuclear weapons, and it was very open about its desire to destroy Israel. And in fact, the Talmud, the rabbis said 2000 years ago that when someone says they're going to destroy you, you are entitled to take that seriously and engage in righteous self-defense. So it is not an out of the blue attack, it's not immoral, and Israel is fighting the war in the most moral, brilliant way imaginable, and the world should be grateful because Israel truly is once again saving the world. And yes, I'm obviously biased, but I will back it up with facts and reasons for why I say this.
Okay. Yes. Let's I'm Jewish in case anyone had any doubts with the name Lieberman. And I don't know if I'd call myself a Zionist per se, perhaps under the way people use it today, but I mean, I love Israel. I've been to Israel. I'm helping people since October 7th. I've been helping people by Zoom in Israel, helping them psychologically deal with the trauma of uh, of October 7th and all the attacks before then, living perpetually under attack in a sense, or at least under threat. So, so I am so proud of how Israel has been conducting this war. Again, Israel did not start it, just to remind people. It was Hamas who invaded Israel in on October 7th, 2023. And they were wearing glasses, video glasses. So they themselves took pictures of what they were doing, all the killing and the raping and the torture and everything else. It wasn't just Israel who took pictures of that. There are pictures from these cameras from Hamas. And yet, even though that happened in that kind of an animalistic way, and even though there are still hostages being kept in Gaza and still bodies being kept in Gaza of the hostages who died, Israel has really conducted themselves in a very brilliant way. Um, I know, of course, some people like to say it was genocide, but it was not genocide. Everything was done to try to make sure that people weren't killed, that the enemy wasn't killed. I mean, the civilians in Gaza weren't killed. Unfortunately, Hamas holds the Palestinians or the civilians of Gaza they hold them in front of themselves. They bury themselves in tunnels underneath hospitals and so on. They put themselves and their weapons in a way that Israel has to ends up attacking civilians because in order to kill them. But Israel has been rather brilliant. The pager fiasco, where they got pagers from Hezbollah and equipped them with explosives, and at a certain time they set them off. And Hezbollah, they had bought these new pagers, and Hezbollah that didn't know anything about it. And same thing with Iran. But I don't want to talk so much. I want to let my guests talk. I just want to make the point that everything that Israel has been doing, I mean, now even their attacks on Iran, it's not to attack the people, it's to attack the weapons and the scientists who created the weapons. And whereas Hamas, I mean, Iran has been targeting Tel Aviv and other civilian places in Israel. So I'll leave that. I'll ask my guest to continue. I just wanted to make the point of how really this is a very brilliant war, very surprising war. You know, everything was taken by surprise in terms of Iran didn't know when it was going to happen. And so a lot of things that are brilliant strategies of war. So take it away.
Well, it is a brilliant war, and I strongly believe that Donald Trump was part of this. Donald Trump is a strategist and a tactician. He sees the long game and he sees short-term ways of achieving it. One of the things he understands is that Iran cannot be nuclear. The Shias in Iran belong to a very specific Shia sect. This is not applicable to all people who belong to the Shia part of Islam. And I'm not a huge scholar, but what I do know is that their specific sect believes that there is a hidden imam who will be revealed at their end of days. Now, what's very interesting about this is when we think of Christians who are apocalyptic in their views, their goal is to survive. If they are not immediately taken up in the rapture, their goal is to survive. They're survivalists. They have 30 years of food and of water and everything. And that's fine. What's different about the Shia is that they don't believe that they're just waiting for the apocalypse. The mullahs belong to a thread of Shia Islam that believes it is their responsibility to bring out about the apocalypse. And what better way to bring about the apocalypse than to destroy Israel, and then, because that's an easy and nearby target, and then turn their weapons on America. Now, I should say this is not the Iranian people are nice people. My father was part of the founding of the State of Israel. He arrived in 35 and left in 54. He fought with the RAF in World War II. He was an infantryman in the Israeli War of Independence. And he was so dismayed by the 1979 Iranian Revolution because he said the Iranians are lovely people. They're gracious, they're brilliant, they're charming, and the mullahs are simply evil. So 40 years of evil ruling from these fanatic mullahs has turned Iran into one of the more secular countries in the world. The people are under forced religious rule, but they are hostile to much of Islam. And the fastest growing religions in Iran right now are Christianity and the ancient religion of Zoroastrianism, which some people might have heard in connection with Freddie Mercury of the group Queen, because he came from that. So, what you have is a country that is led from the top by people who believe that it is their responsibility to jumpstart the apocalypse to bring about the hidden imam. Trump knows this. Trump may not be the greatest scholar. I don't know how much he knows, but he understands that much. And he also understands something very important. And I say this to all the people who think that Trump ought to be like George Washington at the head of the army rushing into battle against Iran. If Israel joins, if America leads the troops, this becomes a world war. And this becomes a war of the great Satan against a significant part of the Muslim world. And right now, what's very significant is how quiet the Muslim world is being in the face of Israel's attacks. They're making pro forma statements from the government, from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia. But behind the scenes, many of these countries, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, have actually been giving Israel aid in intelligence and providing airspace in shooting down weapons. Jordan was shooting down some of the ballistic missiles Iran sent its way. So they're very happy because the Iranians were a threat to every last one of them. This is one of the reasons, for example, that Egypt wasn't allowing any people from Gaza and from Hamas into Egypt because they're a totally destabilizing force, and they're all funded by Iran. So this has been, believe it or not, in the Muslim world, a very uh, popular war. They're just not talking about it. If America gets in, it shifts the dynamic completely. And so, between the fact that it cannot be a world war and that it is working very well to let Israel be the tip of this spear, Trump has been behind the scenes. Nevertheless, it was Trump who kept the talks going for 60 days with Witkoff, who seemed like the village idiot against these sharp Iranian negotiators. And all this while, it was lulling the Iranians into complete complacency. And they're also used to Barack Obama, who drew red lines in Syria and then ignored them, and uh, Joe Biden, who was all bluster and then complete failure. And they'd forgotten that Trump means what he says. And what Trump said all along is, you got 60 days to make a deal. And if you don't make it, there's no telling what will happen. And on the 61st day, Israel attacked. And it's worth remembering that they're now saying that the apparent division, there were talks about Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump being at odds with each other and having a fight. That was almost certainly all faked. And with this, what should have happened on the 61st day is that everybody in Iran hunkered down because they figured Israel would attack. What happened instead is they were completely complacent. Israel was able to use its spies and technology actually to get Iranian the guards, the military, the IRGC into conference rooms that were then bombed. It was able to send missiles directly into bedrooms where these people were sleeping and the atomic scientists were sleeping because the deception was so complete between Israel and Trump. And Trump plays things very close to the vest. He knows that there are leaks like crazy in his administration. And many have said that this was as great a deception as the deception that misled the Germans into knowing where the Allies would strike on D-Day.
Mm, yes, that is really very interesting. There was someone, I can't remember now which one it was, but someone in Trump's cabinet who was supposed to be who's in a position of security, um, was telling him that the Iranians don't have nuclear weapons, or they don't have nuclear weapons at the level that Israel needs to worry about it. And he disagreed with her. You know what I'm talking about?
Tulsi
Sure.
Gabbard.
Yes, right. Um, and it is a little concerning that she's in this huge position of power, and she didn't know that Iran did have their weapons at that level. I mean, Israel knew, because of all their spies that they had in Iran and so on, different ma manners of gathering intelligence. And we need we need our intelligence people, our um cabinet members to know as well. That would have been, it's a good thing that Trump didn't believe her, that he knew better.
Well, she
uh,
may also have been part of the deception. There's been a huge deception going on to lull the Iranians into complacency.
yes.
So Tulsi is a former Democrat, but she's also a very bright woman, and she may have been thrown onto the pyre, the funeral pyre, so to speak,
Mhm.
as a sacrifice to keep this going. Who knows? We may never
Yes,
know
well, I
that
hope
one.
so. I hope so. We'll give her another chance. Well, we have to take a break now. um We are talking about Israel versus Iran. The fate of the world hangs in the balance. And my guest is Andrea Widberg. She is the managing editor of American Thinker. So stay tuned. We'll be right back and we'll get into this even deeper. Welcome back to Dr. Carole's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. Today we're talking about Israel versus Iran. The fate of the world hangs in the balance. My guest is Andrea Woodberg, and she is the managing editor of American Thinker. She's also a columnist for American Thinker. And in fact, she has just written this week a very interesting column. Nobody's talking about this. You're going to get this unique view right now from her. So, Andrea, why don't you go ahead?
Well, this springs off of what I mentioned in the first segment, which is that Iran is currently actually fairly isolated in the Middle East and in the Muslim world because it has ruled through terror. It is Shia, so it's at war with the Sunni nations, but it's also a very specific sect of Islam, which is dedicated to terrorism, which believes it's responsible for bringing out the apocalypse to bring back the Mahdi, the hidden imam, and which is perfectly willing to kill other Muslims to achieve that goal. So whether you're Sunni or Shia, if you're not um, in Iran, you can be blown up by the mullahs. So they are enormously powerful. They have been an old and successful empire. They have the oil wealth. They're all these things, but they have no allies. And that's why everybody is very silent. And there's a perfect historical analogy. What we're all taught in school is that in 1516 or 1519, or at least I was taught in school, the Spaniards, led by Hernan Cortez, 500 men and 16 horses, defeated the mighty Aztec Empire. And the Aztec Empire really was mighty. It was vast. It was incredibly wealthy, and it was sophisticated. It came up with star maps. It had incredible buildings and pyramids, and it controlled the entire region militarily. It also had no problem turning against the surrounding tribes and groups. And it had very, very hungry, bloodthirsty gods who loved nothing more than human hearts. And so the Aztec leaders would routinely have big celebrations where they would sacrifice prisoners. And we're not talking five or 10. The Aztecs were boasting that they sacrificed 80,000 prisoners over 4 days, ripping their hearts out at the top of the temples. And even the lowest estimates are 4 to 10,000 in 4 days. So what happened when Cortez came to the doors of the Aztec kingdom is that he didn't come alone, and he didn't come with 500 troops and 16 horsemen. He came with all of the surrounding people. Every community, every tribe, every kingdom, every nation, whatever you want to call it, joined in because they all wanted to see the overthrow of the Aztec Empire. And that's what I think we're seeing nowadays, which is that Iran is the Aztec Empire. Israel is Cortez, and it's a marvelously armed Cortez, but it is able to do what it is doing because nobody else is joining uh, with Iran to fight. And in today's world, not joining Iran is analogous to those old indigenous people joining with Cortez. Just by sitting out the fight, they are aiding Israel in bringing down a regional enemy whom they all despise. And it was an analogy that just popped into my head because Iran isolated itself, terrorized everyone, and now pays the price.
Yes, that's fascinating. And it's not what was expected really. One would have thought that like uh, all the other countries would have gone with Iran because even though the Sunni and Shia and all that are different, but they're still it's different sects, but they're all terrorists. So you would think that they would stick together. I say they're all terrorists, but well, I mean, some are more radical Islamists than others. Actually, I do a I became, after 9/11, I became the terrorist therapist. That's what I call myself. And what I do, I've written two books on terrorism, and I host a podcast for years and currently called The Terrorist Therapist Show. And my most recent podcast from a couple of weeks ago was uh, all about Trump going to the Middle East and about can we trust, this was an amazing feat um, that he did, getting seeming to get in any case. Their support and getting them together, and no American president had done that before. Um, but I mean, I think he in his first term he talked with them, and of course he got the Abraham Accord, which was, an amazing feat in itself. Um, but I worried at the time about how like these countries have both positive and negative connections with America. For example, Saudi Arabia, that's a good one. They there are Americans who are in the process of suing Saudi Arabia still because of 9/11, because of their contribution to 9/11. But then there are things that Saudi Arabia has done towards America, and towards Trump and on his visit that were very positive. So it's kind of I sort of tried to analyze which face do we believe in? Do we think that they do want to be our friends, or really are they very much against infidels, people who don't believe in their religion. So, so in a general sense, though, I would have expected them to go along with Iran, but Iran is threatening to them too. So it's like, the friend of my friend or the enemy of my friend. It gets very complicated in the Middle East. What do you think about that?
Well, it does. And you're right. One of the ancient sayings in the Middle East is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So allegiances are never permanent. They are always situational, which is really the way it always should be in national policies. I mean, I don't look at Europe today and view those countries as our allies as they were during and after the war and during the Cold War. A lot of them are downright hostile to America, and we're
Mhm.
foolish to continue to treat them as allies, especially as they become increasingly Islamicized.
Yes.
There's also a saying that you may remember from Osama bin Laden, which is when people see a strong horse and a weak horse, they back the strong horse.
Yeah.
And Islam and the Arab world, they're very hierarchical. I'm always reminded of something the British used to say about the Germans during World War One. They called the Germans the Huns, Germ Hun. So they were called the Huns. And what they said is the Hun is either at your throat or at your feet.
Hmm.
And what they were saying is that it was not a society based on equality, it was a hierarchical society. You're up or you're down. And I think it's very much the same in the Muslim world. They are extremely hierarchical societies, they are honor societies. And when you have a strong leader in America and strong leadership in Israel, they respect that. And I think that makes a difference. I also think Saudi Arabia is differently situated than it was in 2001. And again, never, the whole Muslim doctrine of taqiyya, which is you can always lie if it's to achieve your preferred Muslim goals. But I am actually a big supporter of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman
Hmm.
in Saudi Arabia because he is a smart man. He apparently has a very good relationship with Jared Kushner, Trump's Orthodox Jewish son-in-law. So
Hmm.
he is someone who is able to rise above his prejudices for political reasons. And he has been a reformer in Saudi Arabia, but he recognizes that you cannot just take a 7th century country and drag it into the 21st century. He's going with exquisite slowness and care. It took years. He finally let women drive, and that was it. So he's not a
Hmm.
revolutionary, but he recognizes that eventually Saudi's oil will dry up. And he has a culture where nobody knows how to work because they've never had to work. They've been afloat on a sea of money. So he is incrementally trying to change the culture. And he recognizes that Israel is a better ally than Iran. The same way, this is the Abraham Accords, the same way the UAE recognized this. Trump is a visionary with pragmatism. He is a very unique man. I don't think he's perfect. I don't worship him. I don't put him on a pedestal. I think he is a man for our times. And I think if he can go forward with his plans, he will change the world in a way that is better for America and her true allies. And
I
he's
could
not stupid.
I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes I think to myself, what if uh Kamala had won, you know,
Ugh.
and we're in this position now with Iran and all that. I mean, she wouldn't have given Israel any help whatsoever. When after October 7th, Biden and Kamala and Obama, tried to tread water, tried to not show that they weren't helping Israel, but if something like this happened, of course, I don't know if Netanyahu would have attacked Iran if Kamala would have been the president. I mean, that would have been very risky. But anyway, if this had happened, if we had been if today Kamala was president, we would be in really bad shape, not only in Israel, but in America for that matter, for a lot of reasons. But I for on the anniversaries of 9/11 and 10/7, I created for the last 4 years for the 9/11 anniversary and last year for the first anniversary of October 7th, I created these music videos. And one of the things for the 9/11, I talk about how, we are in such danger now and so on. I used to, the first 3 years, they were just kind of warm and fuzzy videos about why we should remember 9/11 and the first responders and the people who died and all of that. This past year, I redid it and I made it much more like a warnings, that we're in grave danger. We have terrorists in our midst. I mean, in so many different ways. The 80,000 people Biden brought over from Afghanistan, none of whom were really vetted. The people coming across the border. Just there are terrorists. The terrorist town that they are building in Texas, which I cannot believe is happening, but that Texas is allowing that to happen. It's just crazy. But all these little pieces that are putting us in danger, and so Americans have to wake up. And so the one that I did for October 7th, I talk about Israel being the canary in the coal mine, and how that's just the first, that in their madrasas the terrorists teach their little children, starting when they're little children, about the best thing that you can do with your life is to destroy Israel and kill Jews. But I try to explain how it's not just Jews; it's anybody who doesn't believe in their version of Islam. And so people in America, those college students who are protesting, notably, especially the gay ones, like when Netanyahu said, gays for Gaza is like chickens for KFC. I love that statement, because they're praising, they're promoting a people, the Hamas, who wants to kill them, just like chickens, if the chickens promoted KFC. So it's such ignorance, and um, and we are really in a bad. Well, I mean, obviously we're in a much better position with Trump as president, but I mean, we're in a bad situation in terms of just how at risk we are with all of these terrorists and would-be terrorists in our midst.
Yes, we are, but I actually am a little hopeful. My children are in their mid to late 20s. And so I get an insight into their world. And one of the things I realize is that a lot of what we see is shaped by a very small group of people. Most college students are not crazy activists. Most young people don't live their lives obsessed with politics. I certainly didn't when I was in my 20s. And so my kids pay attention, but what we see on social media and the protests we see on campus are actually a fairly narrow band. And polls show as the No Kings rally showed, that the most fervent leftists in America are old white people. And second, I'm sorry to say, crazy young women. I've been talking about this for a long time, that leftism has made young women insane. But even that is still a narrow-ish band. And I look at my children and their cohort, and they have a lot of common sense, and they are slowly but surely realizing that what they have been told is untrue and that it is a fantasy world. And so I am surprisingly optimistic about the up and coming generations.
Well, how are they realizing this?
Well, for example, one young woman I know almost had I call them it people, a quote unquote non-binary, try to get her fired from her workplace for being insufficiently supportive of the non-binary's special needs.
Oh God.
And I told this person, first thing you do is you race to management and you say, "You're so sorry. Oh, you didn't know, you weren't sensitive enough. You're so sorry." I said, "I know it's going to hurt, but you got to keep your job." But what happened is my friend got praised because people come and talk to me. And the non-binary person was told that it hadn't handled itself well and was eventually driven out of the company. But what happened was my friend was livid and wasn't quiet about it. And she learned from her friends that they all think the whole non binary shtick is laughable. They're willing to be tolerant of these people up to a certain point, but none of them believe it to be real. So
Uh-huh.
again, that's a very narrow and again, they're taking advantage of vulnerable people. One of my friends, her son has now had all the surgery and all the hormones and calls himself a woman. And it's tragic. It was done to him during COVID when he went to very bad therapy. He was lonely, he was isolated during lockdown, and they told him, "Well, you're not just an isolated, lonely, frightened gay man. You're a woman. You'll be happy."
Yes, yes,
And I'm just worried about the day she calls me and says her son killed himself because he's not a
right.
woman and he's not happy.
Yes.
And people are seeing reality sink in. Reality is what's left when all the lies can no longer be sustained. And our young people are seeing reality.
Yes, the COVID was really a very unfortunate time for a lot of reasons, but yes, the kids who weren't going allowed to go to school or who were made to do it by computer and all that online, um, they got depressed and they got, confused and so here were all these teachers and these therapists who told them right what you just said. The answer to your problems is to change your sex. If you're a man, don't or a boy, you really should be a girl, and vice versa. And so many people got snookered into this, and it's a tragedy because they're waking up. I mean, that's the one good thing is that as these detransitioners are detransitioning or trying to, they are the best teachers for those who are still considering transitioning, because they can tell them I did it and it was a big mistake. Like in other words, these kids will believe them more easily because they did it and they're regretting it. But yes, well, we can talk more about it when we come back. We actually have to take another break. We're talking about Israel versus Iran. My guest is Andrea Woodberg. You're listening to Dr. Carole's Couch, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. Today, we're talking about Israel versus Iran. The fate of the world hangs in the balance. My guest is Andrea Woodberg. She is the managing editor of American Thinker. Her website is americanthinker.com. And she's also a columnist there. We talked about one of her recent columns. It was actually called The Iranian Mullahs Are Learning Montezuma's Lesson. Say that three times quickly. Okay. um, she was talking about the Aztecs, as you will remember, the Aztec Empire, as compared to being similar to Iran. So, where would you like to go from here? Um, just to maybe we could make a segue. I was talking about all the terrorists in America, and what do you think as this war between Iran and Israel continues? And of course, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but what do you think in terms of that stimulating the possibility of that starting off a terrorist attacks in America? Getting the terrorists. I know we talked about how these other countries in the Middle East weren't siding with Iran, but what about the terrorists in America? Do you think that we could start to see a lot of terror attacks?
I hope not. My hope it Israel approached this war with a decapitation strategy. And you were talking about how Muslims teach their children to hate. And I'm always reminded of this song that Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote for the movie South Pacific. You've got to
Yes,
be carefully
yes.
taught.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's always been troublesome about war is that war kills the little people, the generals, the commanders, unless in the old days, in the medieval days, war ended when the king was dead. And I actually believe that chess comes from
Mm-hmm.
Iran originally, and that the phrase checkmate is a mutation of the Iranian phrase for the king is dead.
Huh.
When the king is dead, all the pieces are knocked off the board. That's what you do. You literally sweep the board with your hand. And nowadays, most wars don't actually affect the high commanders. They run away to Russia, or they run away to China, or they run away to somewhere else. And the reason I mention all this is going back to those pawns being knocked off the board. Israel is doing an interesting strategy because if as long as the commanders are still there, they are going to issue commands to the pawns. And the pawns, whether they're in the battlefield or in America, they've been carefully taught. They're the ones who sadly have been turned evil. They're not inherently evil. They're human beings. They've got the good and bad of all human beings, but they have been carefully taught to become weapons in the name of a very malevolent ideology. And with the commanders there, they'll still go out. And if they have suitcase bombs and they do their terrorism, and we are at risk. But Israel, instead of fighting a conventional war where it's boots on the ground and fight the troops and work your way up the hierarchy to the people giving the commands, Israel has done something extraordinary through uh, 20 years of preparation. I mean, this was the active war was prepared over months, but Israel has been planting people in Iran for years. There's even a theory that former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who's been remarkably silent, might have become an Israeli asset. I
Hmm.
mean, that is a staggering piece of analysis. There's no proof of it, but it goes to show how deeply Israel has penetrated Iranian society. And so Israel is going for a first move checkmate,
Hmm.
which means that the players will all be not that the king is dead, the sweep, the players are gone. Who's going to issue the command to the sleeper cells in America to do a terrorist attack, and to what end? The war is lost. The war will have been lost in the first 2 weeks. And in fact, Israel has promised that Thursday and Friday are going to be days when it brings out something new and never seen before. Now, it just may be that Trump is joining the war for the very limited purposes of dropping bunker buster bombs. That's another hard phrase to say on the Fordow nuclear reactor, which is buried so deeply underground that Israel does not have the weapons to get to it.
Mm.
Only America has the weapons that can go, I think it's 200 feet below ground. It's built below a mountaintop. And that, until that nuclear reactor is destroyed, Iran still remains a potential nuclear power. So I don't know what Israel has planned, but Israel is also the one that had the brilliant pager attack on Hezbollah, which completely gelded the Hezbollah leadership, so much so that when the war started, Israel sent a message to Hezbollah saying, if you get involved in this, we will wipe you out and destroy Lebanon. And so Hezbollah sent out a message saying, we disapprove of this, but we're not getting involved. So
Mm.
Israel is thinking outside of every single box to kill the king. Checkmate. And I think checkmate is what may protect us against terrorist attacks against America.
Well, but but what about all the imams in America, for example, and in Europe, in other words, yes, Iran is the biggest state sponsor of terror, but there are people all over the world um, who believe in the Quran and who believe that we have to strike down the infidels and all of that. So I mean, why would they not continue to go along with all of that?
Well, it goes back to the hierarchy and them being a very leadership driven people. And yes, the imams are crazy, but I'd like to think that Trump's FBI at home and Trump's CIA abroad are keeping an eye on them finally, instead of trying to placate them. And I'd like to think there's a strong horse, a weak horse thing. And I keep thinking of a line from the old TV show MASH. It was this the episode was about a mad weekend, and finally it was over, and the colonel of the MASH unit was still trying to lead, and someone said to him, "You are a leader of men, but there is no man left to lead." And I keep thinking that they will be so demoralized that even if the imams are shrieking about we need to kill the infidel, just won't be worth it to them. They will still be bad. They are still bad. These humans who have been turned into weapons will still be bad and do bad things. But I think without Iran standing there talking about, death to America and death to Israel, and with Iran being turned, I hope, into a functional culture, I'd like to see the Pahlavi, the oldest son of the Shah. He's talking about going back. He positions himself as a moderate. The Shah was a very brutal man against the extremists, but we now understand why. He knew what he was fighting. And I'm just hoping against hope that radicals will be co-opted by peace, actually. That it's very difficult to keep up a level of fanaticism when fanaticism is collapsing around you. But I try to be an optimist, because otherwise, why get up in the morning? If you don't believe that your fight matters, if you don't believe you can win, if you don't believe you can make a difference, why bother? And I'm hoping that while I still believe our side, the side of goodness and virtue and morality, can make a difference, I'm hoping that the beheading of Iran, of the snake, of the one funding Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, everything, I'm hoping that its destruction just takes the air out of the balloon.
Well, wow, I hope you are right. I mean, that would be nice. But when 9/11 happened, and I'm a New Yorker born and bred.
Mm.
And when 9/11 happened, that is why, even though I had already moved to California, that is what made me turn into the terrorist therapist and do, all the things that I do that for because in that as that. But one of the things I didn't really know much about terrorism when 9/11 happened, and so I quickly steeped myself in all these, research and conferences and all of this. And back then, um, people were at these conferences, scholars in terrorism, who were already scholars in terrorism, were saying that what terrorists are going to do now is to embed themselves in all the different parts of American life, politics, schools, corporations, the justice system, all of these different aspects of our life, and they were going to climb the ladder and they were going to be able to attack us in those ways. They won't have to always resort to bombs and things like that, but that they're going to get to us, in a sneakier way. And that was, 23 years ago, 24 years ago almost. Um, and they were right, and that has happened. And and so it just, we it's just so it's hard to believe that they'll just all throw up their hands and say, well, what's the point?
I agree with you, but I do think at a certain point, you probably remember in 1974, a lone Japanese soldier was found in the jungles somewhere in Malaya or someone. He was still fighting the war. But most people simply can't sustain that. And they're also collapsing under their own weight. Ilhan Omar and the other squad members, the
Yeah.
squad is yesterday's news now.
Yes,
Now we
yes.
have Jasmine Crockett trying to reconstitute it. When you keep having losses, you might keep fighting, but it's very hard to get adherents to come to your side, and people will peel away. So, again, I'm an optimist. I want my children to grow up in a safe America. I look at Donald Trump. I look at what the more activist FBI is doing. I look at everything, and I simply have to live on hope, even though I recognize that risks continue.
Well, I like that. And I agree with you. I just always also try, besides helping people cope with terrorism and cope with living with the threat of terrorism, I always work on trying to wake people up to the fact that the threat is still there. But yes, from your mouth to God's ears. And I definitely feel much more hopeful with Trump at the helm.
Yeah,
Well,
because
thank you.
I believe you have eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. The moment we relax, we're at risk again. But I'd like to think that we currently have a government that is not relaxed, and that these people have are overthrowing themselves. But the moment we relax, the cycle starts all over again. So you are right, always to be concerned.
Yes. Well, Andrew Woodberg, thank you so much for being a guest on Dr. Carol's Couch. Really interesting analysis of things. And thank you all for listening. You've been listening to Dr. Carol's Couch. Oh, let me just give you again the website to go to. It's americanthinker.com. Um,
Yes.
and you will find her column to, if you want to get back over, learn more about the Aztecs and how that relates to Iran and all that, and just in general, American Thinker is a good publication. So it has all kinds of interesting stuff. Well, thank you again, and thank you all for listening. You've been listening to Dr. Carol's Couch, and I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman.